friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today we are doing one of my favorite videos that we do all year, and that is the top 10 fantasy series of all time. Now, this is a video that I appreciate doing every year because it gives me a chance to kind of see how my reading tastes shift, if at all, what series end up staying on the list, which ones move around on the list, and which ones fall off entirely. And this is always really hard, you guys. Like, ranking these series is really difficult, and I'm just gonna say that other than like the top 3 or 4, they do tend to shift around a little bit depending on, like, if you asked me in 3 weeks where everything would line up on this list, it might be slightly different. The top 3 are pretty firmly in place, but other than that, everything's pretty fluid. But I was able to rank them for this video, and I'm very excited to share that with you. The only other thing I want to say before I start getting into the series themselves is just that if there's a series that you really love that isn't on this list, that's completely fine. Either I've read it and it didn't jive with me as well as it jived with you, or I DNF'd it, or I like these series better. This is completely subjective. This is my own personal opinions about the series that I've read and loved, and I do tend to read off the beaten path a little bit when it comes to mainstream fantasy. So there will be some very big popular series that you're not going to see on this list, and again, that's just due to my reading taste and the things that I personally like. So let's start with an honorable mention, because that's how all top 10 lists start. The honorable mention for this year is going to be Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, which I feel like this is a series that always will have a special place in my heart because it was kind of my gateway into adult epic fantasy. I loved the series. I loved what Sanderson did with the hard magic system, which isn't usually something that I like as much. I do tend to enjoy a little bit more mystery to my magic. I like softer magic systems, but Mistborn had a world and a setting and a structure that really pulled me in and made me really excited about what I was reading. It brought me into epic fantasy in a way that I hadn't really been before, and led me on then to try other things like Stephen Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen, etc. I feel like a lot of us here on BookTube have a similar story with, you know, Mistborn being a gateway into epic fantasy, and because of that, it will always be very special for me. Number 10 is the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. This series is one that I do want to reread going into the future, and because I kind of bounced off of Live Ship Traders, and I've talked about that extensively on my channel. Farseer, I loved the tone. Fitz is an idiot half the time, but he's our idiot, so it's okay. And I think one of the things that I really value about Robin Hobb's writing is just how deeply she digs into her character arcs, and how the writing feels like a warm hug, even while she's telling you this really epic story that has a lot of movings around, but it's still always very character focused, which is something I adore. And I bounced off of Live Ship Traders, I think largely for, you know, I had lots of reasons. You can go watch my video on that if you want to know more. But I also think the tone was incredibly different than it was for Farseer. And I think that's part of the reason why fans of Realm of the Elderlings will say, if you really didn't jive with Farseer and Fitz, try Live Ship Traders, because it's a way to experience Robin Hobb's writing outside of the Fitz storyline. For me, it was the opposite. I didn't love Live Ships, but I really enjoyed Farseer, and I'm actually really looking forward to getting into the Tawny Man trilogy, which is the continuation of Fitz and the Fool and everybody, and I can't wait, you guys. It has been too long since I dove into a Robin Hobb book, and I'm really looking forward to trying the Tawny Man trilogy. Everything I've been told leads me to believe that this is going to be a knockout series for me. And Robin Hobb's writing, again, is something just very special, and I have missed it, especially in the context of the characters that were introduced in the Farseer trilogy. So this series is definitely worthy of a spot on my top 10 list, and I look forward to experiencing more of Realm of the Elderlings in the near future. Number 9 is going to be the Mortal Techniques series by Rob J. Hayes. This is a wuxia-inspired, heavily folklore-filled series of standalones that are loosely connected to each other. And there are meddling gods, there are twists, reveals, there are incredible martial arts plus combat plus magic elements to these books. Never Die kind of sparked my love of this series, but it was truly Spirits of Vengeance, book 3, that solidified it as one of my favorite series of all time. I love the way that Rob Hayes incorporates that kind of nostalgic shonen anime / martial arts films vibe in the story while making it completely his own. And the characters are amazing. The Easter eggs that are kind of seeded throughout the series I love, and callbacks to previous characters. It's so good. If you are a fan of Asian-inspired fantasy, this is a series that I would highly recommend, especially if you're someone that grew up loving martial arts style shonen anime, because this is kind of the adult version of that. I mean, not to say that shonen anime isn't still an adult thing, because I still love it, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I love this series so much. Spirits of Vengeance is definitely due for a reread, and I think there's something within this series for everybody. Each of the 3 books that are out in it currently are so unique, and because they're all standalones, it's a perfect setup for a series where if you just want to try one, or if, you know, these 3 books end up being the only ones in the series, there's no sense of not having closure because they're all standalone stories. So he's really set up something pretty special with Mortal Techniques, and whether we get any more books in the series or not, I have absolutely loved my time with these characters and the world that he's created. Number 8. This one is a series that may move up on this list over time. The reason why it's here is because it is my most recently finished fantasy series, and you guys have been hearing me talk about this ad nauseum since I read it earlier this year, and that is the Coldfire Trilogy by C.S. Friedman. What a ride, you guys. This trilogy blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. It is so character intense, which I love. The emotional immersion with these characters is brilliant. And one of the things that I love the most about it, beyond the characters, is we talk a lot about loving genre mashups here on the channel and in this niche of BookTube, where we love it when authors take multiple genres and put them in a blender and create something fresh and unique and interesting out of all of the genres included. And in my opinion, C.S. Friedman is kind of a standard for me with genre blending now, because she takes science fiction, fantasy, and horror in this series and creates such a masterful balance between the 3 of them that I kind of forgot that each of those individual genres was being represented in the story. She's telling a story that is so uniquely its own. The atmosphere and environment is so palpable as you're reading that you kind of forget that this is a science fiction fantasy horror blend, and you're just left with this beautifully balanced story, and it doesn't matter. And I love that, and it's brilliant, and I think that she really hit the nail on the head with that combination. The journey of the characters through these 3 books is so deeply moving. It's so interesting. It's so thought-provoking. This is one of those character arc stories where it asks you to become part of a conversation, to ask questions of yourself and the world around you alongside the characters, which, as you guys know, is something that I love in reading fantasy. But at no point did I feel like she was leading me on, that she was telling me what to think about the characters or what was going on in the story. And I absolutely love it. The atmosphere that she pulls off in this is so living and breathing. It's amazing. I love it so much. And it'll be interesting to me to see how this series stays with me over time. And that's one of the reasons why it is in the lower half of the list for now, because one of the things I also factor into this list as I make it every year is, am I still sitting with this series long after I've read it? And there's a series coming up later on the list that you'll see has jumped really far up because of that. So I'm excited to see where this series continues to lead me in terms of that thought-provoking element. I'm excited to read the prequel and highly, highly recommend this series. I think it's absolutely fabulous. Next up is probably going to be my most controversial pick for this list in terms of where on the list it falls, and that is number 7, Malazan Book of the Fallen. Now, the reason why, if this is your first video from me about my top 10 favorite fantasy list, the reason why this is a shock is partially because this series has been in the number 1 spot for the last, every year I've made this video, as far as I'm aware. And this year it has dropped significantly. And there's some very specific reasons for that. One of which is I had been going through my reread. I read the first 4 books over a decade ago, and they left a monumental impact on me as a reader, as a writer, and I've never let go of that experience, and it still means the world to me that it did what it did for me at the time. After reading my first new Malazan book this year, Midnight Tides, which is book 5, I was deeply disappointed by that book. I was committed to finishing the series at some point in general anyway, but that book really made me question if I actually wanted to do that, largely because of the content that was included. And I think the biggest disappointment for me in that was that the content he was exploring and utilizing within the plot and with the characters reflects some of the themes and issues that he deals with in Dead House Gates, book 2, which is and beyond, which is my favorite fantasy book of all time. And I had to get really honest with myself, because if I pull Dead House Gates out of the series and set it to the side, where does this series fall for me? And the reality is Dead House Gates is the reason why this was my favorite fantasy series of all time, largely. And so getting realistic with it and recognizing that disappointment, and I'm not sure where it's going to go in the rest of the next 5 books in the series to finish it out. Yeah, seeing the way that he portrayed some of the female characters and some of the male characters in Midnight Tides, and it got to a point where there was some content things in the story where I literally asked myself, why would you ever write this in a book? And not to get into anything spoilers or anything too detailed, but I just was so disappointed in this book, and it's probably one of the most disappointing fantasy books I've read in a very long time. And again, it's not because Erikson isn't an incredible writer, because he is. I do not think that Malazan is the type of series that needs a PhD to read. That is something that goes around BookTube all the time about this series. It's silly. I think too many people are too intimidated by the story in terms of the writing and the amount of characters. It is a lot, I won't lie, but I don't think it's as scary as everybody makes it out to be. And one of the things that Erikson does so well is creating just the vastness. I've never read a series that managed the kind of scope and timeline that Erikson does, and explores so many very human struggles the way that he does, while also, so you have that intimacy with the characters, but also just the vastness of the magic and the world and the timeline of history that is being utilized for the storytelling. It's a massive feat of storytelling, and that's one of the reasons why it has stayed on my fantasy favorites list for so long, and why, you know, the first few books in the series, especially Dead House Gates, have stayed with me for so long. But yeah, this series, I'm very interested to see what my experience with it continuing and finishing the series is going to be. I don't know. At this point, I'm just going to kind of set it here as a placeholder and continue to keep you guys posted with my opinions on the rest of the series. I have heard from a lot of people that know my opinions of Midnight Tides that Bone Hunters, which is book 6, is probably going to hit a lot better for me, so I'm really looking forward to that, and to just, I love being in Steven Erikson's worlds. I love the nostalgia and the tone that it brings, and it's very easy to just walk in and get lost in the story, which is something I really love about it. Number 6 is the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. This one, man, this series, I typically don't land on more modern setting fantasy as much. I typically love the more ancient, historical kind of feeling epic fantasy. This series blew me away when I first read it, and I was amazed at how brilliantly Fonda Lee managed the balance between that urban fantasy setting and still making it feel very epic and very unique. It is based very heavily in Asian cultures, and which is one of the reasons why I love it so much. But the magic system, I think, is what creates that seamless balance between the kind of modern urban street warfare vibe with that epic feel that we love so much in fantasy. And the idea of the jade, and that there are people who can use it and people who can't use it. It's a very familiar fantasy element, while having a fresh take on a very socioeconomic look at street warfare and these ruling families that are constantly in conflict with each other, but in that modern setting. And this was a series that I don't think I realized how deeply invested in the characters I was until I finished the trilogy and had just a huge emotional reaction to the end of the story. I bawled. I went through so many Kleenexes at the end of this series. And she's also a very bold storyteller, which is something I enjoy. She takes risks within her fantasy storytelling, and that's something that really inspires me as a writer, to see an author who isn't afraid to pull a plot twist in places where we're not expecting it, to take the story in a different direction for the sake of the story. She's not sacrificing anything. It makes sense. It's completely, crossed T's, dotted I's from a writing structure standpoint, but it's bold. And I really, really love that. I love an author who can surprise me in fantasy in a good way, because that doesn't happen as often when we're so used to reading so much fantasy. But yeah, Greenbone Saga is definitely one that I have a lot of fond memories of and really enjoyed reading. Number 5 is another surprise on this list, and that is a series, like I was mentioning before, that has stayed with me for so long after reading it, that when I finished, I was like, wow, I really like this series a lot. I really had a good time with it. It's gonna stick with me. To now, where the longer I've been away from it, the more and more and more I'm thinking about it, the more I love it, and the more I want to go back and reread it. And that is Josiah Bancroft's The Books of Babel. This series I read for my husband because he read it and loved it, and so I picked up the series and I wanted to read it so that we could discuss it and that I could share his excitement about one of his new favorite fantasy series. And it was a slow start for me. When I first read Senlin Ascends, I was kind of 50-50 on whether or not this was going to be a series for me. I wasn't really sure how I felt about where it was going. Book 2, I liked better. And then books 3 and 4 were full 5-star reads for me, and I absolutely loved it. The ending of this series tends to have some controversial, polarizing opinions on both sides of the fence. And I get that. I completely understand why people that get frustrated at the end of the series don't like it. I personally loved it because I think throughout the whole series, Josiah Bancroft is absolutely 100% true to his characters and the story that he is telling, and I loved that. But it is one of the most unique fantasy series I have ever read in my life, and again, this is something where I respect the boldness of an author who is willing to take risks and ask those what if questions in fantasy, And it starts it with a very simple, very intimate premise, which is that Thomas Senlin, who is a, school teacher from a rural town, gets married, and on his honeymoon, he and his wife come to the Tower of Babel, which is this massive, kind of fantastical landmark that everybody who's anybody has to go to and vacation at. And there's a lot of mystery surrounding the different levels of the tower and all of this stuff. And Senlin ends up losing his wife in the crowd on the first day of their journey. And what follows is just an incredible journey of self-discovery and of vengeance and of, reconnecting and being kind of finding the truth about who you are and the way you see the world and the way that life actually is. And I know that all sounds really vague, but I really think that this is a series that you should go into as blind as possible past that information. And just the character work that Josiah Bancroft does in this series is phenomenal. It's so well done. And the prose, Bancroft's prose is the kind of writing that I was constantly pausing, reading again and savoring, backing up a little bit, reading and savoring, and then going to my husband and being like, can I just read you this? It's so beautiful. It's so thought-provoking and detailed, and I just loved it. Incredible, incredible prose. Incredible story, incredible characters, and I'm very happy to let everybody know that it has stuck with me so much that it has jumped very high on the list. I think last year it was my honorable mention, and this year it's up at number 5, which is wild. So clearly this is a series that has meant a lot to me the longer I've been away from it, the more excited I am to now go back and reread it. I think the first book I'm going to have a completely different experience with now having read the series, and I cannot wait. Number 4 is going to be The Land of Exile by J.L. Odom. This is a ancient history, kind of fantasy adjacent story because the magic is very, very, it's almost more implied than real, if that makes sense. And I love a good ancient fantasy, and I love that fantasy allows us to have these deep explorations of morality and faith and individuality and identity and all of these things. And Jamie is managing in this trilogy to have such a deeply nuanced discussion with all of those things in a way that I truly don't believe many fantasy authors are just able to do. And it's brilliant. It is absolutely beautiful. Her prose and her settings, the way that she describes the environment in her books is beautiful. Her character work is so subtle and so nuanced, and she trusts the reader in a way that invites you in. It's not the kind of trusting the reader where it's like, good luck figuring it out. It's her saying, come on in, be part of the story, immerse in the story with these characters, and just, it's such a beautiful experience, and this series means the absolute world to me. I cannot wait for book 3, which is coming out very, very soon, and I have no doubt whatsoever that she's going to land this series perfectly. And because she has so much experience as a veteran and as somebody who did a lot of linguistics and translation during her time in the military, that shines through so beautifully. The way she writes military elements, the way that she writes languages and translating, and the way that she describes, again, the environment that they're in. She's utilizing the experience she's had as an author to their absolute maximum in this series, and I love it so much. All right, guys, top 3. Number 3 is The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. This is another one of those series that I could say is one of the most unique series I've ever read. Daniel Abraham accomplishes in a span of 1,000 pages over the entire quartet what many authors don't accomplish in 10, 12, 14 books. It's very, very compact epic storytelling. It is Asian inspired. It is the kind of story that takes you through a generation of decisions and how the decisions made by the characters in book 1 have massive ripple effects all the way through to book 4. I love that kind of story. I love generational stories so much. And this is one that just... I felt like very quickly after starting the first book, I realized that I felt more like I was reading a masterclass in epic fantasy writing craft. And again, phenomenal prose that every word feels deliberate and effortless and intentional, but it doesn't feel overburdened. And that's such a hard balance to hit, and I'm so impressed by that. The other thing about what Daniel Abraham's writing accomplishes that I love, 2 things. One, the way he writes characters is not the typical heroes versus villains. They are just characters in a world, and they make decisions, and he just kind of leaves it there. He doesn't tell you what to think about them, or this is obviously a hero, or this is obviously a villain. They're characters, and they have arcs, and it's up to you as the reader to engage with those story arcs and decide how you feel about the decisions that they're making. And the second thing is the magic system. Daniel Abraham's magic systems are so powerfully unique. The magic system in the Long Price Quartet, and I'm not going to say too much about it because it is something I think you need to experience instead of be told about, is deeply tied to the power of words and the exact way that words are spoken or written, and it's incredible and also mildly chilling at multiple points. And he really dives into the consequences of power and magic in this series, and I love it so much. It's not the kind of series that I think is one of those gateway series where it's, you know, just the kind of book that I would hand to somebody that has never read epic fantasy before. Maybe. Depends on the person. But it is the kind of story that someone who loves fantasy and somebody who loves that kind of epic generational style storytelling that takes bold risks that pay off is going to absolutely love. Number 2 is the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch. Good old Loch Lamora. And I want to make a little caveat here because I know there's a lot of people in the booktube community who get very upset at series that are not finished. And I understand that. I understand the frustration of wanting a series to be finished and wanting more content and having that closure. Totally get that. And also, I have zero hesitation putting this series on my number 2 spot, whether it ever has another installment or not. And part of that is just because these 3 books are so good that I'm grateful for the experience that I've had with them, regardless of whether the series continues or not. And I know there's a lot of talk going on right now with Scott Lynch working on Thorn of Emberlane Book 4 and a lot of other stuff kind of alongside the series. But The Lies of Loch Lamora structurally is one of the most interesting and engaging stories I've ever read, both as a reader and as an author. And because I am approaching storytelling from both angles, I really love when a book gets an A+ on both fronts from me. That's the best feeling, where I'm like, intellectually as an author, I'm just amazed at what has been created here. And also as a reader, I am just loving the experience of being in the world and with these characters. And the other thing that I don't think that Scott Lynch gets enough credit for is his world building and his prose. I think his prose is stunning. I love his prose. It's very gritty, it's very straightforward, but it's still beautiful. It still shows the somebody who is writing from a perspective of just loving the way words are put together and the way they sound and the images that they're able to evoke through storytelling. And second, the world building. It is very unique in this fantasy series. It is very much like Vienna, you know, canals kind of cityscape, and it's so unique. It's a kind of fantasy setting that I don't see very often, if at all, and I think he utilizes it to a really high degree, which is another thing. It's one thing to have a beautiful world building as kind of a set dressing to the story that's going on, but I feel like a lot of authors don't utilize the setting they give themselves to the highest degree that they could. And so it's always really rewarding to read a story where the author is fully aware of the world building around the characters, and he or she is going to utilize that really, really well. And number 1, this is my favorite fantasy series of all time currently, and that is The City Watch by Terry Pratchett. This one I have mentioned multiple times in videos up to this point that The City Watch was going to be up here, and I really feel like it represents everything I love in fantasy at this point in my life. Which honestly, if you had told me a couple years ago that a satirical fantasy was going to be at the top of my list, I would have laughed and walked away. Because I'm not the type of person that typically likes a lot of humor in my fantasy, and I know a lot of you guys in my audience are the same way. And what makes this different and what sets Terry Pratchett apart is that he has such a sharp, intelligent wit. I don't see this as satirical fantasy as much as I see it as someone with a lot of intelligence, a lot of that sharp, sarcastic wit, taking a really close look at humanity in all of its forms from the perspective of fantasy storytelling. And it's brilliant. It's one of the most brilliant things I've ever read in my life. When I first read Guards, book 1 in January of 2024, I had no idea how much this series was going to mean to me, how much it was going to change my life as a fantasy reader. And once I got to book 2, that's when I started recognizing, okay, this is feeling different. This feels like something that's really gonna hit for me. And by the time I closed that final 8th book, I was so in love with this series that I had the most massive book hangover closing that last book. And even though Terry Pratchett, unfortunately, was, heading downhill in terms of his cognitive ability with his dementia and Alzheimer's, I was worried that 8th book was going to feel like an unfinished ending, and it didn't. It felt like everything I wanted from the last book in the series. It was such a beautiful full circle from Guards, and there's so many things to love. The characters, you guys. These characters will live rent-free in my head forever. I love them so much. The Motley Crew is S-tier fantasy character writing, and there's so many moments in this series where I stopped and I was like, that's so real. That's so relatable. And yet, while we were having a lot of conversations about the moral compass of the universe in all its forms, I never felt like Pratchett was telling me how to think, and he didn't feel like he was being condescending. Sharply aware, yes, and very specific about the different things that he wanted to address in the series, yes, but not in a way that ever made me feel like I didn't want to be part of the conversation. I love this series so much. This is one of those series that feels like it's so deeply embedded in my heart at this point, and the characters are so deeply embedded into my heart and who I am as a person at this point, that I think it's going to be pretty tough to top the experience of reading this series. And I highly recommend it, even if you're somebody who doesn't love fantasy with a lot of humor. Just try it. And I think also, if you're somebody, and I know, here, everybody get your bingo cards out. If you're somebody who loves audiobooks, please listen to the John Culshaw versions of these books, because I think while I loved the series completely on its own, his narration of it elevates the characters and the stories to such a transcendent level. It's beautiful. Incredible audio narration alongside an incredible series. So, highly recommend that. And yeah, I'm excited to go back and reread the series all over again and go back to the world of Ankh-Morpork and all of the characters, because what an experience reading that series. What an experience. So, that is my official list of my top 10 fantasy series of all time. And I'm dying of curiosity to know, down in the comments, a few things. One, If you have a favorite series of all time, if you have a list of your favorite series of all time, no matter how many are on it, feel free to drop that down in the comments. I always love to see what you guys are most passionate about. And also, does anything on this list surprise you in terms of where it ended up landing on the list? I know that number one is not going to be a surprise to people that have been following my channel this year, but it has been a year of shifts, and I feel like it really reflects my reading taste and the way, the type of stories that are resonating with me really powerfully in this stage of my life. And I've been so grateful to have expanded my fantasy repertoire so much in the last 6 years here on BookTube. I love it so much. I'm reading series and loving series that when I first started my channel, I would not have guessed that I would love. And I think that that's a really powerful testament to what, you know, being willing to step outside your comfort zone and try new things and take recommendations from people that know you can do. So highly recommend that. Also, if you want a specific recommendation from this list and you want to try a new series and don't know where to start, drop your reading taste down in the comments below and I will respond, and I'm sure a lot of other people from my audience will respond with some fantastic recommendations. And I want to say a big thank you to you guys in general, because a lot of these series I've been encouraged to read because of my audience and the friends that I've made here on BookTube, and that is something I value immensely. So I hope that you guys are having a phenomenal week. I hope that you are reading some 5-star reads and your new favorite fantasy series of all time, and I will see you guys in the next video.